Good evening, everyone. This is a very important session, which is a very important and supposed to be a difficult part of SAT, that is science. So let's start. I hope it is visible to all of us. Okay,
Yes, it is.
great. So science is the last section in ACT. And this is one of the section where most of the students are not very comfortable with, especially the students from non-science background. As in the students from humanities or commerce or economics, they really find this section a little difficult one. At the same time, there are students who have science as one of their subject during in their school. So they find it really good. Like they believe that the science section is going to be helping them to score better, score good. But the irony is I have observed that the students from non-science background, they usually find it tough later on, and the non-science background actually these students do well with the time, because this section here, science section in ACT, is not science. In fact, this is a section which is set in the environment of science. So this is something very important for us to understand, that the section which we are dealing with here is named as science. Of course, the questions are related to science. The questions, the passages which we see are related to the science environment, but the knowledge of science is not required to answer the questions. So this is a test of science. This is not a test of science, but a test of data comprehension. Data comprehension, which is set in an environment of science. So what is important here is we should know some basic concepts, not the basic concept, the basic terms of science. And that would be sufficient to answer the questions. In fact, this is one test which is not about the content, but it is more about the approach. Right? So whenever we deal with this section, science section here, this is more about approach, the approach which we should follow to answer the questions. It is more about data comprehension, and that is how we pick up the questions and answer these questions. So of course, like some basic terms are going to help, but rarely we use science concepts to answer these questions. What are the challenges? Now, the issue is like, why if it is not science? This is a very obvious question, that if it is not science, why this is considered to be one of the most difficult section in ACT? Because of 2-3 challenges or obvious reasons. The number one is, the first challenge which we have here is that this is the last section. Being the last section, of course, we are done with 3 sections, and then we have spent some good time and energy into those sections. By the time we reach this section, we are tired. We all are human beings. Obviously, we have a capacity. Our brain has a capacity to perform up to a particular level of time. But after that, we usually find it really difficult to concentrate and focus. So this is very important for us to understand, that we should not run out of our energy. We should not feel tired. And that is what the first challenge which we have here is. That is the last section. The other challenge which we see here is we need to solve 40 questions in 35 minutes. Now, this is again another issue which we face here, because if I look at the other sections, we have good amount of time available, maybe 1 minute for each question. Right? But when it comes to science, 40 questions, 35 minutes, time management is often an issue with most of the students, and they really find it difficult to manage the time. The third challenge which we have here is the pattern. So the pattern is all about passages. Again, if we compare this with other sections like math or English, where we have the direct questions, we read the questions, we understand what this question is all about, we pick up the answers, we just apply our learnings into those, and we get the answers of those. But here, the pattern is all about passages. We have passages where some data is available. So just using science knowledge directly is not sufficient. In fact, most of the times, we are not able to get the chance of applying our science knowledge directly to the questions. So it is more about the pattern again. This is about passages, about there are certain experiments or the studies which were conducted some years back. So those passages are there. We need to use the data, the information from those passages to answer the questions. So these are the challenges which we come across. So as far as the pattern is concerned, we have, as I said, 40 questions, 35 minutes, and 6 to 7 passages. Right? Now, 3-4 years back, there were 7 passages, but of late, this is reduced to 6 passages, sometimes 7 passages also. 6 to 7 passages with 5 to 8 questions per passage. So this is the pattern we have. So we need to take care of this. As far as the passages are concerned, around 2 to 3 passages are related to data representation. Now, these data representation passages are the easy ones, right? So in these passages, we just look at the information. There's a lot of information available, less of text. We can use that information to answer the questions. That's why these passages are considered to be the easy ones, right? The second variety we have here is this, there are 2 to 3 passages which are based on the research summary. Right. Now, research summary is considered to be a little difficult one, because in this case, we are actually solving the passages which belong to certain researches happened in the past, and the data or the results of those researches are shared here. These research summary passages are more on text. In fact, if I compare with the data representation passages, here we have equal amount of text and equal amount of data. That means it is around 50-50%, I should say. Right? So in data representation, it is 80% of data, maybe, and this is general, like of course 5-10% here or there, and 20% of text. But in research summary passages, these are 50-50%. Like we have equal amount of data and we have equal amount of text. That's why these research summary passages are considered to be a little difficult. And then we have the third variety, and which is one passage, just one passage. And this is the most difficult one, the hardest part in ACT science, and this is conflicting viewpoint. So conflicting viewpoints is something where most of the students are not very comfortable. They actually find it very difficult to answer these questions, and that is going to be a problem. So this is something which we are going to have a discussion on it. Right. So when I look at this, these are around 6 or 7 passages, and which we are supposed to solve in 35 minutes. Right. So if I just go through with the time, let us take 7 passages. Right. And we have 35 minutes to solve. So if I apply simple math to this, we get 5 minutes per passage, right? So when I solve a passage, I have 5 minutes, and there is a complete passage available. There is a lot of theory available there. So if we read this passage, of course, it will take 2 to 2.5 minutes to read. That means if I spend 2 to 3 minutes in reading the passage, I'll remain with 2 to 2.5 minutes to solve 5 to 8 questions. Now, this is the challenge. So just 2 to 3 minutes we have, 2.5 minutes are available, and we are supposed to solve 5 to 8 questions. Obviously, it is going to be an issue. We are not able to do it. It is not going to work this way. So what is the solution? What is the problem? How we can just take care of this problem here? So I'm going to claim something here, which most of the students will find it very difficult to digest. That is, don't read the passage. Right? So this seems a little awkward, how we can solve the questions, because if I compare this reading comprehension, these passages of science with reading comprehension passages, which we have been doing since long, without reading passages, how is it possible to know the data, to know the information, and how we can answer these questions? And that is what the beauty of the science section is here. The students who actually learn how to answer these questions without reading the passages are of course going to perform better. In fact, this is the only solution which we have available here. And this is something which is going to help us finding out the solution of the problems. Then the thing is how we can do this, right? So this is something which we need to remember. That is, we are not supposed to read the passages, because if I read passage, I don't have time. And this is the test of time. ACT is a high pressure test based on time. We of course need to take care of time like anything, right? So how we can do this? So the most important thing which is going to help us taking care of these passages without reading passages, if I'm supposed to read, if I'm supposed to answer the questions, the first and the last learning which I'll be giving to you, all of you here, is the locators. Not all questions maybe, but 70 to 80% of your problems, 70% to 80% of your questions could be taken care of by using the locators. The locators are basically of two types. We have primary locators, right? So primary locators are those which tell us where to look for my data, right? And then we have secondary locators. The secondary locators are basically helping us to find out what. That means what is the question, what is the data, what is the information given to us, what should be the solution of this information, what should be the solution of this data. So the locators are going to help us with the information, with the strategy which we have just, I have just mentioned, that is, don't read the passage. So if I'm not reading the passage, if I'm just focusing on the locators, this is going to help me finding out the solution of the problems easily. So locators are the most important part. In fact, this is something which is always there with us. Not all questions will have these locators, but yes, 70 to 80% questions will definitely have this, and we'll be using these locators to answer the questions, right? There are more varieties, there are more things which are a part of it, which we'll learn with the time, right? So let me share some text. Just give me a second. I'll just. Okay. So I'm starting a test. This is a live test. This is actual test taken from actual SAT, right? So we'll be solving some of the passages from there, and that way we'll understand how the things could be taken care of. Okay, so I'm starting with sectional test. I hope it is visible. So this is the test which we are following. This is exactly the same as the SAT website is, right? So we have developed our own software for this, and this is going to give you the complete feel, the exact feel of what SAT is. So SAT is exactly the same. Look at this. So we have some tools which we don't recommend to use much, right? We have this section, like we have all these instructions given to us. Deliberately, we have mentioned 33 minutes. Otherwise, we have 35 minutes available to complete the test. We have certain instructions, 40 questions we have, 33 minutes to solve. Next. And look at this, the timer just started. So the timer is something which is always going to keep you, giving you the pressure, right? So this is. Okay. Now, this is the first passage we have here. This is the data representation passage we were talking about. In fact, if I look at science section, this is about, I have discussed three variety of passages, that is data representation and research summary and conflicting viewpoint. But to be very honest, data representation and research summary, both these things are more or less alike. This is just the difference between the text and the data, the percentage of text and data. So we can say that science section is basically about two parts. One is conflicting viewpoint and the second part is everything else. This is one passage here. I could see there is a passage, there is some theory given here, there is a table, there are two figures, there are two tables, there are two figures, and we have a question. Now, how to answer these type of questions? That is what we are looking at. So I'll read the question. As I said and mentioned earlier that I'm not supposed to read the passage. So it says, I'll directly start with the question. It says, if an E. coli level of over 400 colonies form per 100 milliliter of water. Now, this is something which we need to understand. They are talking about 400 colonies per 100 milliliter of water, and E. coli is the bacteria. So these are the locators they are talking about. Then is unsafe for swimming on which of the following collection days, right? So my locator is telling me to look at something which is 400 colonies per 100 milliliter. So look at which figure I should look at. If I look at figure 1, I get to know the mention of E. coli colonies per 100 milliliter, right? Now, this is the data which is available to us, right? And we are looking at something which is over 400 colonies. So we have this data mentioned here, 400 colonies are here. If I look at this information, it is 30 days, site 1. So what should be the answer of this question? It is day 30 at site 1, right? So we are able to answer this question without reading the passage, without reading even a single sentence or a word from the passage which is given there in the question. Just looking at that question, just looking at the information and the locators, we are using that to answer the questions, right? Let us take out the next one. This is question number 2. Yes, this is one good variety. I have these questions where, we have multiple options, like we have multiple options, and then those options are divided into 2 parts, right? So this is, we call it, we will be using a process, we'll be using a method to answer this question, and we call it, okay, so this is PBP, right? This is process by part. So what we'll do here is we'll divide this into 2 parts, and then we'll look at the options available to us with only one side, and let's see if we can just, check out with the options. If all the other options are ruled out, we have just one option on the left-hand side. That means the second option will follow. Now, what is this? Let us understand. It says based on figures 1 and 2. Now, what is my locator here? My locator is telling me to look at figures 1 and 2. Consider the average water flow and the average E. coli. So they are talking about average water flow and E. coli level for site 1 and 2 over the collection period. Which site had the higher average water flow and which site had the higher average E. coli? So my locator is asking me to look at both the figures. So we should pay attention to both the figures. And then in both these figures, we need to find out the higher average water flow and higher average E. coli level. Again, I'm not supposed to read the theory part, which is given there in the passage. Let's check out. Figure 1 is talking about E. coli colonies, right? That is average E. coli level they are talking about, right? So when I look at this, this is site 1, this is site 2. If I look at these bars, the black bars are higher in number as compared to site 2 data, right? So when I look at the options, it is given me higher E. coli level. So site 2 is ruled out, right? If I just scroll down. So the site 2 data is ruled out for these two options, right? And then if I move on to next figure, which is about the water flow, look at the y-axis. Again, if I look at the water flow, site 1 is going to have more value as compared to the site 2, right? So I check out the higher water flow on the other side. Now, again, these two options are ruled out, which are about site 2. So I remain with site 1. And which option is going to help me here is only one option I remain with, that is F. Right? So both the options are site 1 and site 1. Right? So without again reading any of the information given in the passage or any other theory part, I'm able to answer this question just looking at this. Right? Let us see more questions from here. Oh, wow. Now, this is a different variety of question here. Again, this is data representation only, but the question, the way this question is asked, is based on a different kind of process, and we call it heads and tails. Right? Now, look at these options here. These options are divided into two parts. We have yes, yes, no, no. These are also called as yes, yes, no, no type of questions, which we usually call as heads and tails. Right? Now, these questions are going to be a little tricky one. These questions are having some issues. Why? Because if I read the complete information, it is going to take time. As we have discussed, that it is something which is going to be a difficult thing for us. And the second thing which we need to know here is there may be a confusion, right? There may be a confusion because each option is divided into two parts. Okay, so let us see how these questions can be solved. As water quality improves, the number of stonefly larvae, a type of aquatic invertebrate, increases. Right? So there is some different type of larva which is increasing as the water quality improves. Students hypothesize that more stonefly larvae would be found at site 1 than at site 2. Are the data presented in table 2 consistent with this hypothesis? Now, what are my locators? Table 2 is the locator which I need to follow. I look at table 2, where it is, oh, this is here, table 2. It is telling me that site 1 has average BI of 6.3 and site 2 has average BI of 2.5. Now, if I read all these options, it is going to take time. So what I'll do here is, we'll follow the TELS approach, which we always recommend that go with the TELS approach. That means without using yes and no, check out the options, right? So it is telling me, and see, they are talking about only table 1. But we need to know how this average BI is going to affect the water quality. So for that purpose, we need to follow the table 1 as well. So it is telling us that more than greater than equals to 3.6 of BI is going to give us excellent water quality. Right? So if I take into consideration these two data, these two tables here, I understand that site 1 had a water quality rating of good and site 2 had a water quality rating of poor. So site 1 is 6.3, it should be excellent. The moment I read this information, it is ruled out. Right? Based on BI, site 1 had a water quality rating of excellent. Yes. And site 2 had a water quality rating of fair. So what is this? 2.5. 2.5 is fair. Yes, it is satisfied. Let us see the next option. Based on BI, site 1 had a water quality rating of poor. Ruled out. Based on BI, site 1 had a water quality rating of fair. Again, this is ruled out. So these three options are ruled out. So I remain with only one option, and that is B. I'm able to answer this question also. Right? So this is how we can answer the questions without reading the information passages. So this is data representation. Right? Let me go with another variety. Maybe I think question number 11. Oh, yes, this is. Now look at this passage. This is passage number 3. Students studied forces by using two identical platform scales, scale A and scale B, one of which is shown in figure 1. Right? Now, in this is what? This is, look at it. Look at the theory part. Study 2 also we have some theory and this one figure. Then more theory. And then we have more figures. So this passage is not data representation. This passage is research summary, right? So some research is taking place, and then they are using this research to find out what are the studies they are going on, and then they are coming out with the information. So what is the difference in both the passages? Again, we have graphs, we have some table, we have some data manifestation, but it is more of theory. We should not read the theory unless it is forced to read. You are not supposed to read this theory until it is asked. Right? So yes, these questions can be solved the same way. In which are the following trials in study 2? What is the locator? Study 2. Look at it. If any was the force of 10 Newton weight equally distributed between scales A and B. Now the point is, this seems to be a physics question. So do I need to have physics knowledge? I don't think so. They're asking us to look at study 2, that is my primary locator. 10 Newton weight, that is my secondary locator, distributed between scales A and B equally. This is the keyword which we need to look at, right? So when I look at study 2, if I move further, oh yes, these are the places, these are the values. Look at the weights. 10 Newton, this is a little close to scale B. The second trial, this is not exactly in between, but this is, yes, comparatively in between. And again, another trial, it is a little close to scale A. So this is trial 5, right? So my answer is trial 5, right? So this is how it works. So this is the second variety. And of course, these questions can be answered the same way. Quickly, I'll go with the third variety of questions. This is conflicting viewpoint. And look at this. This is the difference between this, the conflicting viewpoint passages. The basic difference between conflicting viewpoint and other passages is we don't have graphs or tables. So when I don't see any graph or table, this is going to be a little difficult because locators we were using to answer the questions. But here in this case, the locators we are not able to connect. So in this case, what is to be done? This is, I'll just move on to this is the typical passage. Look at it. Complete theory, complete 100% text, no data, nothing. So what we should do here is always read the last 1 or 2 lines of introduction passage. That will give you the problem they are discussing. This is color of the sky. And look at the first 1 or 2 lines of the introduction passage. The sky is blue because light from the sun reflects off of the ocean waters. So this is the viewpoint. Just read the first 1 or 2 lines, that is sufficient. So from here, I get to know the reflection is important. This friction is causing the spark. Scientist 2, the sky is blue because the shorter wavelengths of light are scattered more strongly. The color blue has the shortest wavelength. And scientist 3, this is interesting. I agree with scientist 2, but with 2 exceptions, blue does not have the shortest wavelength. This is the most difficult part. This is the place where we usually commit mistakes. Why? Because there is an agreement and there is an exception. So we need to halt here. We need to take some time. We need to find out what is the agreement and what is the exception. Thumb rule is the agreement is always the first line which is given by the previous scientist. So I agree with scientist 2. Scientist 2 says the wavelength, the shorter wavelengths. So that is the agreement. Shorter wavelength is the agreement here. And what is the exception? The exception is the color of the sky is actually a mixture of short wavelengths largely comprised of blue and green. The second line was blue does not have the shorter wavelength. Okay, so this is a mixture of blue and green. Right? So why this is considered to be the most difficult one and the most trickiest one? Because these are the viewpoints which are given by the people, scientists, students, or teachers. It's not necessary that each and every viewpoint is correct. Maybe all the viewpoints are wrong. Maybe all the viewpoints are correct. Right? So it's not necessary that there is a scientific reason for that. So with this information, if I answer these 3 questions quickly, we just have 1 minute with us. The present day electromagnetic spectrum shows the color purple to have the shortest wavelength. Right? The moment I read this, scientist 1 is ruled out because they are talking about wavelength. This evidence weakens if at all the viewpoints of the student. So who is talking about the color? Scientist 2. So scientist 2 was of the opinion that blue is the shortest wavelength and it should appear blue, but they are talking about the color purple. So that is scientist 2. Question number 5. Suppose ocean waters contain a layer of particles. Now ocean waters, they are under, okay, let me read further. On its surface that yielded a low refractive coefficient. Scientists 2 and 3 both are not talking about the ocean water. There is only one student is talking about the reflection actually, and that is scientist 1, right? So just having this keywords with us, we are able to answer the questions. Again, we are not supposed to read the entire theory. The difference is for the first 2 variety of passages, I said, don't read the passage. Here I'll say a small change. Don't read the full passage. Read some part of it, right? And question number 6, it says, assume that light from the sun is comprised of all wavelengths of light except blue. The present day electromagnetic spectrum shows the color purple to have the shortest wavelength and the color red to have the longest wavelength. Based on the information, scientist 3, scientist 3 is important, would most likely agree that the human eye would perceive the sky as. A lot of students commit mistake because they read this complete information and they come out with the human eye in this case is only able to see longer wavelengths of light, which translates to colors like red or orange. And then students pick up the answer as red. I have seen more than 90% of my students answer this question as red. No, this is not the answer, because they are talking about sun. Scientist 3, and the question is about the sky, which we have agreed among the shorter wavelengths, right? And shorter wavelength is purple, so the answer is H, not J, right? So this is a light of kind of confusion which we have. So these are the variety of questions we have in science, 3 important passages, and we have just observed and seen that the knowledge of science is not required. So that's it from my side. If there are some questions, please.